Hello, everyone, and welcome to Are You Afraid of the Workflow? Shining a light on why they aren't that scary. So, we're here to talk about workflows, of course, but more specifically, migrating your reading process from the legacy reader to workflows. Now, we know the kind of anxiety that a transition like this can bring, so we're here to meet you where you are, address some of the hesitations that make a switch like this particularly spooky, but also shine a light on why workflows will actually make your life easier and ultimately save you time and money. My name is Nina Takach. I'm a Slate Admissions Implementation Strategist at Carnegie. And for those of you who do not know, Carnegie is Technolution's first Platinum Preferred partner, and we are proud to staff the country's largest dedicated Slate team with 47 full-time Slate strategists and counting. My colleague Ryan could not be here with us today, but Ryan is also a Slate admissions strategist at Carnegie, and he's had about 14 years of experience in higher ed with over 20 implementations in his Slate career. And I'll pass it to my colleague Maria.
Hi, I am Maria Sepulveda. I am the Associate Director of Admissions, Operations, and Strategy at the University of Rochester School of Nursing. I've been there for about 4.5 years. I've also been working in higher ed for about 4.5 years. I will pass it to Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Starkin. I'm Director of Admissions and Enrollment Management here at the University of Rochester School of Nursing. I have 16 years of higher ed experience, which includes 2 Slate databases, and about 4 years here at the School of Nursing. And now I'll pass it back to Nina.
Thank you so much. So today we're going to talk through some of the most common workflow phobias and how to quell those fears. Next, we'll hear from our partners at the University of Rochester School of Nursing about their experience building and launching their workflow. Then we're going to talk about some hazards to avoid when making your switch. After that, we're going to talk through some unique use cases for workflows. And finally, before we turn it over to you all for questions, we will leave you with some tricks and treats that will help you get your workflow up and running in no time. So let us begin with a quote. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. The oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. H.P. Lovecraft. That was before workflows were invented. Me, Nina Takach. Now, workflows have sent a cold chill down our admission spines ever since they were announced several years ago. So much so that many of us are still waiting to make the change. And if you are still using the legacy reader, no judgment. That's okay. That is why we're here. So let's go ahead and address some of the most common fears that prevent our partner schools from making the switch. So common workflow phobias, or workflobias, if you will. First and foremost, it's too heavy a lift. Our school perhaps does not have the resources to make this change, resources being time, staff, just general bandwidth. Slate knowledge and training. Perhaps you or your staff are not well-versed in Slate in particular. Perhaps you have additional training that you need to accomplish before you can feel ready to build this workflow. This is a common fear that we hear. Timing. When do I make this switch? What if you have rolling admission? You never have a down period with reading. How about who? Which applicants do you make the switch with? All at once? A few at a time? How does that work? What about your current reads? Students that are currently being processed right now. We can't just stop the reading process cold. What do we do with those applications that are being read currently? Change is hard. None of us like change. Readers are comfortable with their current process. We all are. Maybe they already have been trained and they don't want to be trained again. Or perhaps it's just scary to think about learning a brand new process when you already have so much on your plate. And retraining. Like I said, learning a new process is stressful. What are the time and resources that are going to be dedicated to retraining? And what if I break it? Triage and troubleshooting overload. How am I going to know how to troubleshoot this workflow? How much time is that going to take? And reader frustration. Is this going to harm relationships with our stakeholders, people we rely on to read and process applications? So let's talk about how to lighten the lift a little bit. Build and test concurrently with your reads. So workflows can and should be built in production and set as active. What you'll do is you'll create a custom exclusive permission, apply it to the workflow so it won't confuse your current readers. Once your framework is built, your bins are all set, refresh the test environment and test in there. And then because of this, there's really no need to have an extended down period to launch this workflow any longer than a few hours. Same general elements, just consolidated. So if you've built a legacy reader before, you can build a workflow now. The same skills are needed, but building and maintaining a workflow will actually be much easier this time around because it's all contained in one convenient interface. Building a workflow is configurable joins training. So if configurable joins are your concern, and building in configurable joins is required within workflows, I do have good news. Since you can build and test concurrently with your reads, you can really take your time building out your bins, rules, forms, tabs, filters, views, etc., all in configurable joins. So by the time you are ready to launch your workflow, you will have built and tested countless configurable joins, filters, exports, rules, and queries. So it really is built in practice if you aren't feeling confident in configurable joins just yet. As I mentioned before, workflows utilize the same elements of the legacy reader process. It's just consolidated into one place. So what you're looking at now should look familiar to everyone. This is the 5 components of the legacy reader: bins, tabs, groups, forms, and of course, rules are also a big element of the reader. However, they are not contained here. They are actually contained in the rules interface so that you can build out that automation. I think I can confidently say that no one enjoys having a million different pieces parts to build out one process. But take a look at this. Wow, impressive. This is the new workflow interface, all consolidated into one: bins, rules, queue and automations, tabs, forms, views, and your reader lookup dashboard all in one place. It's amazing, isn't it? Some might even say mind-blowing. So let's talk about finding the right time. Pick a launch date well ahead of time and stick to it. So we all know that it's very easy to put off this transition. Many of us here are currently putting it off as we speak. So pick a launch date and stick to it. We don't want to delay the build of the workflow because we are not ready to launch. So if you have a launch date in mind, make sure that you are timelining your bandwidth appropriately to make time for the build, testing, and then launch. As mentioned before, hide the in-progress workflow with a custom exclusive permission. So as I mentioned, building the workflow in production is a really important piece because once you are ready to launch or ready to test, you can refresh the test environment and test in there. The custom exclusive permission you add will hide the workflow from anyone who you do not want to see it. So those stakeholders will not even know that anything is really going on in terms of disruption of their reading process. Communication. Communicate early and often. Tell your stakeholders that you are making a change. Remind them often of this change and when the go live date is, so that no one is surprised when you have, a down period perhaps of a few hours to launch your new workflow. So every stakeholder should be prepared for this transition. Take your time. As I mentioned, it is difficult to make the transition. However, because you can hide the workflow as you're building, and because you can read concurrently with this current build, you can really take your time to build and test as you need. So there's no reason to rush while you're building your workflow. Take your time, troubleshoot as needed, and launch when you're ready. When you are ready to launch, choose a low volume time of day and set aside a few hours to turn everything on. As I mentioned before, your stakeholders should be well prepared because you have communicated early and often that this is taking place. So perhaps an evening or a weekend where no one is in the reader, or perhaps just a slow day, Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m. perhaps, is when you should make your switch. Let's talk about embracing the change. If you've been in Slate for a while, you know that new features and updates and improvements are par for the course, not just every year at Summit, but all throughout the calendar year. And this is actually a very rare benefit to working in Slate, as many other CRMs don't change as frequently to meet the needs of clients and students. And many of those updates that are made in the other CRMs are opt-in only. So not everyone even has access to any new features or improvements. So keep in mind that Technolutions is making these updates and changes to make our lives easier, not harder. So let's embrace the change, be ready for it when it comes, and really lean into it when they do. This is a unique opportunity to zoom out and identify any recurring issues with an ongoing process. It's not often that a team, an admissions team, advancement team, student success team has the time and space to address processes that have been in place for years at this point. So take advantage of this moment, really think about what's not working, talk through them with your team, and take the time to fix them. Here are two examples of mapped out processes that we built out as a part of our preparation before we started building a workflow for a few of our partners. So visualizations like these are very, very helpful in working through your current processes and identifying potential issues and inefficiencies. Not only that, but these visualizations are an excellent resource for training for your staff and for testing. You can always look back at these to see where a record is supposed to live if it's in the wrong place. One additional benefit for workflows, and I think this is one of the most underrated benefits of all, the end user experience does not change. There is no significant retraining when you're moving from the legacy reader to the workflow. I want you to take a look at this image. This should look familiar to everyone as the reader interface where you go to read applications or other records. Now take a look at this other image. Can you spot the difference? Surprise, they're identical. The end user experience doesn't change. The reader interface remains identical to what it was before, with a few tiny changes regarding views. But your end reader does not need to know that there is updates going on in the background. All they need to know is that it works. Things might break, and that's okay. Not really. Slate is very resilient. You're not going to ever break Slate. However, you will run into issues as you go, which will need troubleshooting, which is par for the course for any system. But remember, you built this workflow, so who better to fix it? Test, test, test. I said it before, I'll say it again. Testing is absolutely crucial to launching a successful workflow. Testing will always reveal issues that you miss. When you test, make sure to impersonate a variety of users with various roles that will ultimately be working in the workflow. It's always quite revealing when you see what others see. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. There is no perfect launch. Think of when you launched your first Slate application. Applying students will always catch errors every single time. So too will your readers, but don't let that stop you from launching. Managing the workflow will be an ongoing process, and that will include troubleshooting as they arise. Luckily, you've got the skills to troubleshoot. You built this. So now I'm going to turn it over to the Rochester School of Nursing to talk about their experience.
Thank you, Nina. So at the University of Rochester School of Nursing, we have all undergrad, graduate, and doctoral programs. We have second degree options. So these are programs that are specifically undergraduate focused that have a second bachelor's degree. So they're definitely fall into the previous programs. And then we have approximately 800 students for all of our programs. Another interesting fact is that we have ongoing application cycles. We enroll 3 times a year for all of our programs and multiple departments within the Slate instance. So we have different professional development groups and professional schools that also are within our Slate instance. We have to work with multiple groups. Some of our specific fears and hesitations that we kind of listed out before we embarked on this project was lack of time. And with that, it was how will we learn, implement, and train others on these new features since we have so many things going at once, as well as going down a rabbit hole of new issues and forcing band-aid fixes. So impact on time to decision, because that is a crucial thing for our applicants. Also, the lack of knowledge. So again, like Nina said, fear of breaking it. Do I have a safety net? And how do we explain this to stakeholders if we break it while we're in the middle of reviewing cycle? Staff challenging. So staff challenging was definitely something that we needed to consider because our team was being pulled into many different directions when we were down staff members, and very few users know how to fix the bugs and maintain processes, but also those users were being pulled in different directions. And then most importantly in staffing was the historical context, the why. Why do we have to move this now? And the other is finding the right time to switch. Multiple application deadlines with no pause for cycle prep. We don't have time to pause and audit our system, look at our system, review everything that before we start the next enrollment cycle. Therefore, we also have multiple review processes for different programs at different times without the year. And now I'm going to pass it over to Maria.
Thank you, Kim. So despite these fears and hesitations, implementing a new workflow did lead to multiple positive outcomes. And of course, we learned a whole lot along the way. One of those being just a reminder that change is a positive thing. This move reminded us how much room there is for improvement within our system, and that making those changes can help us continuously review and improve our processes as we go. As Kim mentioned as well, we were initially nervous about making mistakes, how those could impact our stakeholders, but we were also able to see the benefit in making these. As all of us know, things in Slate sometimes just break. So especially for me personally, being relatively new in this role at the time, it helped me grow a lot in my knowledge and confidence of the system, but also confidence in learning how I'm building something and being able to make mistakes and learn how to fix those as well. In terms of our fear of explaining errors or mistakes to our stakeholders, this project and all of the work that stemmed from it actually helped us improve our communication with stakeholders. In order to avoid confusion and frustration, we gave our reviewers all a heads up in advance, letting them know that we were making this change. Even though they weren't anticipating to see anything different on their end, like Nina showed you, the reader would look the same to them. We did just want them to know that we were making a big change in our system, and we encouraged any honest feedback that they might have. More eyes are helpful if they do see anything different, like, for example, a file is just in the bin it's not supposed to be, if they're seeing the wrong form, something along those lines. So just giving them a heads up ahead of time really helped communicate, build that communication. And like I said before, this was a huge opportunity to improve our processes in general. Embarking on this project involves a much deeper look into each element of our review process, because a big step is understanding how the process should work before we build out a workflow. So as a result of reviewing our processes, we actually decided to complete a full overhaul of some of our review processes. We took this opportunity to make some much needed updates to some of our rules, our review forms, and even application requirements that we noticed were in need of improvement. But most importantly, this project sparked the Slate juice for us. Basically, this project was the gift that just kept on giving. It showed us what we could and honestly should be doing in our processes. It taught us a lot about the different features that Slate has that we could be utilizing, and just got us thinking about where else we could be using workflows as well. In addition to the lessons we learned, we also noticed a great deal of real tangible wins as a result of all the work we did. One of these was the way we were able to build the new workflow itself. So we were super excited that we were able to build the new workflow while continuing to review applications, because we do have that ongoing cycle for all of our programs. We were nervous about not having time to stop reviewing, build a workflow, and then start again with a new workflow. So we were able to take our time to build this out thoughtfully. We didn't do it all within a week or even a month. So having that custom permission that allowed us to build a new workflow in production was incredibly helpful, so we could continue reviewing applications in the legacy workflow without impacting the experience of readers who were actively reviewing those applications. As we were walking through this change, we spent a lot of time rethinking our review forms as well. We were previously using one read one form for all of our programs, and there were several other points in the process that we were using one form, even though our programs have very different requirements. So we realized that this was making our forms incredibly convoluted and full of conditional logic that was just becoming frustrating when we needed to make any updates. So we completely changed and simplified these forms. We divided our processes into graduate and undergraduate when they were previously one process. And dividing up these forms and simplifying them will help us greatly with regular maintenance and updates of these forms in the future. Another change that's helping us save time was implementing automated queue assignments. So now when a file enters read one, it will automatically be assigned to a reader for both our undergraduate and graduate populations. This was previously a manual process, so saving us a lot of time now as well. And lastly, we completely changed our interview process for one of our programs, moving from live interviews to video essays. This change alone greatly reduced our application reading time. We saw a reduction of 1 month in our reading time. So as a result of making all of these updates to our processes and workflows, we were incredibly excited to be able to capture a 50% decrease in time to decision. This was so exciting for us, for our stakeholders. As you can see with one of our programs in the original process, we had an application deadline of November 1st, and we were sometimes releasing decisions as late as mid to late February. With the new workflow, we still have that same application deadline, but this past year we were able to release decisions mid-December. So we're super grateful for the move, for all of Carnegie's help in making that possible, and of course, just the impact that's having on our applicants, that they're able to receive their decisions sooner, and that's helping our yield as well. I will turn it back to Carnegie.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Now let's talk about some hazards to avoid, your basic do's and don'ts of building workflow. Don't procrastinate your go live, but do pick a launch date and stick to it. I'm sure there are many of us in here who have an entire workflow built out just waiting to be turned on. Avoid this. Pick a date. Be conservative to account for your team's bandwidth, but not so conservative that your launch date never comes. Don't build without a plan. Do map out ideal processes ahead of time. Before you start your build, take the time to visualize, discuss, and debate your current processes with your team. Then map out your ideal reading procedures before you begin to build. Don't just replicate your same processes. Do be open to correcting inefficiencies. This is not the time to cut and paste. Use this opportunity to identify pain points and address any recurring issues and make changes. If you're doing a complete overhaul, just be aware that this will take more time and more testing. Don't automate everything. Do eliminate manual steps where possible. I know it's tempting, given all the amazing automation that Slate can do, but sometimes automation is not the most efficient answer. Every reading process eventually needs a reader. A human being needs to take action on a record in the vast majority of workflows that we build. So it may be easier sometimes for an actual person to select the next bin, for example, instead of attempting to automate it. Don't turn on without testing. I've said it before, I'll say it again, test, test, test. It's essential to building and launching your workflow. And finally, don't be afraid. You've got this. Can you feel the fear fading away? We can. And now we're going to talk through some alternative use cases for workflows beyond just application processing. Recruitment. We've built many workflows that are referring to prospective students. We've seen workflows that have been built to assign staff members for territory assignments, for example. A re-engagement workflow. Communication and activity monitoring. Utilize a workflow to monitor a student's progress through a complex task using messages and response forms. You can build a workflow that's concurrent with app processing, like financial aid, scholarships, waitlist review, chase materials, deferral processing. Post-admit or matriculation workflows. Admitted student processing as well for student success. Maybe perhaps final official transcript review or transcript credit evaluation. International students, visa and immigration documents. And advancement, of course. Perhaps managing donor information could be used for workflow. And of course, what would a spooky themed summit presentation be without some tricks and treats? We've prepared some fun tricks that will help you take your workflow, build to scary new levels, and treats that are sure to satisfy your Slate sweet tooth. Let's start with tricks. Don't worry, these aren't the spooky kind of tricks that are here to make you look like a magician. We'll show you how to peer behind the veil of the current user, bring files back to life, and conjure calculations with ease. User-aware overview. It can certainly be frightening giving someone access to see all the bins in your workflow, but what if you could show them only what they need to see? With this trick, we build a share view that senses who is using it and only displays applications in their queue. Now, a user can browse the entire workflow without fear of moving or reviewing a file that is not theirs, keeping their focus on the task at hand. We start by adding a subquery to our shared view within our filter, and then we join to the workflow bin user table. Now, move a file upon new material rule. We all have that one bin where files go to expire, but with the right kind of rule, you can reanimate applications as new materials are added. These rules look for an application scope materials, person scope materials, and school scope materials. When one of those materials is updated, we compare the material creation date to the bin enter date. You can use this rule to keep your files from getting buried. Pair this with a custom bin notification to alert your team that a new material has been added to keep your files moving efficiently. Calculations in views. Using the aggregate functions of configurable joins combined with shared views in workflows, we can calculate high, low, and average review scores right in the application select list. By joining our review forms, we can look across submissions and have our readers think we are wizards. Combine this with the user-aware views to not only show combined averages, but also show personal review history and aggregate values as well. And of course, don't think we forgot your treats. Here are some treats for you to take home. Along with our 2 visualization examples, we have a suitcase ID with some helpful queries. We have links to our available trainings and recorded webinars. Simply scan this QR code, which will take you to the Carnegie Summit resources page, which will have a copy of this presentation and all of the above resources. And if you're thinking of migrating your workflow, we at Carnegie can consult with you to help you do that. Feel free to find any Carnegie team member or email us to inquire. And that concludes our presentation. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation on quelling your fears for workflows, and we do hope that you are ready to launch your workflow anytime soon. Have a great day. My name is Nina Takach, and I work for Carnegie. Bye-bye.